Hi. So, good morning, good afternoon, wherever we are in the world. If I can just get a thumbs up from the team that the sound is good. Yeah, fabulous. Okay, so very welcome to our sales session today. I think it's a critical session. We're all very concerned, of course, about the new normal and what's about to happen. So allow us to go through the presentation. It's going to be about 30 to 35 minutes, and then we're really going to try and do some questions and answers. We also have the chat in the functionality. So please make use of that. We'll try and get some of those questions answered as you go. So fantastic. So let's get going. I think the only certain thing currently is the uncertainty that we're living in, and we used to banter this word around new normal, but the reality is it's no longer a new normal. It truly is just literally normal. And I think the one thing that we've realized working with entrepreneurs over the last 3-4 weeks intensely on what do we do now with sales, what do we do with go-to-market, is the fact that nothing we used to know in the way that we knew it apply completely now. And I think the one thing that we've realized is if truly the sooner we get to the point where we accept this is now normal and we just get on with it, the sooner things will change for us. So what we're going to try and do just over the next 30 minutes is literally just talk through that and just talk through this normal and how we navigate it now, because the reality is more than ever, and as we see more and more data come out, is that there are some big truths, but that's why we're entrepreneurs and that's why we're business owners, and we will just work around them. So I'm Catherine Young. I'm from Thinkroom. We've been in the business for the last, I think, 7 or so years, and thanks to the team who's really put this all together. I'm just here showing up to present, but there's a lot of work that's gone into the back. So let's understand what it is we know. Truly, there's so many numbers going around, and we have two choices here, and we realized this as a Thinkroom and a Grindstone team, and we work also very closely with Knife Capital. We realized this very early on when the lockdown started to happen and when the pandemic hit in a proper way, is that there's so much information, and rather filter the information, smaller bites, otherwise you get too overwhelmed. Personally, I've switched off news channels. I used to be on 24/7 almost. I now am very structured about it. I get on probably 3 times a day, check what's going on in the morning, understand sort of midday what's happening, and then in the evening and really always with the lens of literally in this order, and we will speak about prioritization, how that's changed a little bit later on, but literally always with this lens. How's it impacting my family? How's it impacting my team and the teams that we work with? And how is it impacting the business? And that may sound very weird to you as we speak about the family and the teams first, but the reality is that we will only be able to, in the normal as we know it now, survive and get through this if we truly watch out for each other and watch out for ourselves and have a different sense of care almost. So what do we know? There's a lot of information, and I've just put a couple of things down. But as an example, the first thing I want to share is we are all in the same boat. I know that sounds like stating the obvious, but this thought helps often when I get despondent at times, when I feel enough now. How do we switch? What do we do? And then I often think of this. We're all in the same boat. And what really gets us back as a team into the business of selling and the business of just keeping on is just get back to the basics. If there's ever been a time where we just can relearn our basics in life and in business, it's now. So let that be a reminder for the days that you feel a little bit down and think, oh my goodness, how am I going to close the sale or not, that we are all in the same boat together and we're all navigating new territory. So the reality with that is it's an amazing opportunity because it's new territory for everybody. It's not going to be about those who are the cleverest or the most innovative. It's going to be those who have the staying power to just get through the next 12 to 18 months. So remember that. The second statistic that we know, I'm just using this one as an example, but as an example, Guardian said this morning or yesterday morning, they said about 195 million jobs in the next quarter globally will be impacted. 6 or 7% of the hours available globally will be impacted. And we know some geographies like India play a big role in this because of the numbers of people and the lockdown being extended. But the reality is this number just wants to, I'm trying to illustrate that there's going to be an impact on jobs. And I think this was also something that I had to get my head around as we were navigating this, is that how do we manage that? And one of the things that we've learned with a lot of peer sharing is over communication as much as we can currently with families, with teams, with partners, with customers, and we're going to get into that shortly. The next one is cash preservation is key, and I have another slide on that, so I'm not going to speak about that too much, but the reality is we've got to buy ourselves cash. No pun intended, just to get through this period of being not so sure about what will happen with sales, etc. So if we can start thinking about sales not only in terms of what it is we're buying, what it is we're selling, but also in terms of what it is we may be not selling but saving, etc., etc. So our philosophy generally on sales will have to just take a different slant for now, but I'll speak a little bit more about that. Right, so the next one, the money lost in the global economy for the next 2 years, they're estimating to be between $3 and $5 trillion. And again, we're going to just talk through this in this deck with you about how that's such an opportunity, because the reality is, if we know that, we can plan for how do we make way around that. And really, if there's ever been a time of, hashtag hacking, this is the time now. And I'm not talking about hacking in the horrible sense of the word, but just hacking processes, hacking what we used to know, hacking the way we think about how a customer buys, and just make those processes much shorter and be much more responsive, much quicker. We will be able to understand how not to be part of that $3 to $5 trillion lost over the next 12 to 18 months. And the reality is that what we will try and illustrate later is that there's such hope by selling differently, we actually will get through this. So, the next thing that we know a lot about, and judging by those on the call, we have some of the industries and sectors represented on the call actually, but we know some of these sectors that are going to be hard hit. So we know travel, for sure. We all know that. We're all missing the opportunity to be able to travel and get rid of the cabin fever. Manufacturing impacted greatly. As an example, I was reading something just over the weekend in terms of China. We know when China went into lockdown first, they're starting to come out of it. But the reality is that there's now a trend where, of course, because of the break in supply chain, there's a lot of rethinking from a lot of our corporates, customers, B2B, if you B2B, in different countries all over the world, where they're saying, well, maybe bring some primary manufacturing back home. So the reality is manufacturing is greatly impacted and will be impacted, but again, an absolute opportunity for when we get out of the lockdowns. The next one is logistics and transportation. I mean, think about that. So I don't know if you saw the same, but I never thought about this. And whilst we're going through this, I've learned this, that there are, I don't know how many thousands of containers on the water at any point in time, and this is goods. And now with extra care being put into cleaning the containers, making sure that they clear in a different way when they land on land, wherever they are, it's really impacted in a completely different ways. Companies such as some of the courier companies in the UK, man with a van is a very big industry, as an example. All those companies, many of them are saying they are directly impacted because things are traveling differently. So for those on the call, as an example, who are into transportation and logistics, I'm sure you figured out, and we're going to ask on the last 10 minutes to share some more stories with us. But the reality is, have you figured out the new ways that the logistics are running? What does that look like? Because you have to figure that out to be able to know how to sell differently, and how to engage with your customers differently. The real estate market, we know, is in a very interesting space at the moment. So, but again, the opportunity for now, we are all working from home. That is a real that's a real thing. So the reality is that corporate leases, companies renting loads of office space, that could change. We just don't know what we don't know, but within that is an opportunity, because currently the market is completely dead. And then of course retail, bricks and mortar, non-essentials, we know that that's been impacted greatly. Some of the participants on the call today, you are working with retailers, whether it's through predictive analytics or whether it's determining new shopping patterns, etc., etc. Again, what an opportunity. So bricks and mortar, of course, is impacted, but online is taking on a whole new world. And again, forgive me for stating the obvious, but the important thing here is to just, sometimes for us as business owners, and for whoever's responsible for sales, marketing, and the business, is that we just step out and just take this 30,000 feet view again and say, okay, so how do I turn this into an opportunity? And lastly, giving up is not an option. The show must go on, and there just isn't. Of course, this is. We're speaking, or the media speaking, recession. The media speaking the worst that it's ever been since the 2008. In fact, much worse than after the 2008 fallout. But the reality is, the show must go on, and this is the most important message that you as a business owner, you as somebody representing a business or working in a business can do. This thing of the show will go on, and with your clients and with your employees and employees themselves. What we're also finding is that as we have to sell, we sometimes get despondent, and when the one's up, the other one is down, and then we support each other that way. So do you have the support structures in your business when this happens? The last thing I want to do say about what we know before I go into the content specifically is this notion of, we're all working from homes now. Many of us have to do homeschooling with the children. Many of us have to now take responsibility for being primary parent, if the other parent's on the front line, whether that's in retail or in healthcare, or however, or trying to get things delivered, etc., etc. So a big appeal really for all the business owners on the call, and also speaking to myself again, is that we cannot expect the same way that we used to have in terms of a 7 to 4 or an 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's changed, and the reality is that sometimes people will have to go shopping if they're in lockdown 10 to 11 in the morning on a work day. The key here is about being highly fluid, being highly responsive, and over communicating between teams so that the sales process goes on, so that when the customer contacts, there is somebody on the other side of the line. The counterpart to that is that by no means means that team members cannot contribute the way they should be. So what am I saying? We still need in fact, we need more level of output than what we used to get from the teams, because right now everybody's just having to get through this phase. But we have to be flexible in how we get that output. So it will be less about measuring hours, but it's going to be about measuring outputs and understanding that we now have a 7-day working week across teams, depending on circumstance, until we start getting out of lockdown. So that is in terms of what we know currently and setting the scene. And I'm just doing a time check. We're good. Okay. So just from the Thinkroom team, if there's anything, just pop me on the comments, please. Next, I want to just very briefly refer you to this. We're going to be sharing this deck anyway with all those on the call. So don't have to worry about taking notes. But Sequoia provided a very interesting matrix for COVID, and they're saying we should be looking at scenarios for our businesses of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. In some instances, we're wondering about the 18-month scenario. Why is this important? And I'm not going to go into the detail of the matrix, but why it's important to have these different scenarios planned and absolutely have an execution as part of that plan for every one of these scenarios is because sales, of course, is a big driver in getting us to scenario A, B, C, or D, and also buying us time over this period. So for those on the call who are directly responsible for running your businesses as business owners, have you got the scenario planning sorted in your business? Have you considered that and how that will impact on both sales and expenses, which we will be talking about next? There is a great gentleman in the South African ecosystem, Vusi Temakwayo, and I just very briefly want to talk about business preservation advice that he put out probably three or so weeks ago. But it's critical. Again, read the detail in the slides that we will send. But he calls it the 5 C's. But the principles. Many organizations talk about this. Ernst & Young just published something yesterday, actually, on something very similar. Cash is going to be critical. What do I mean by that? So the cash that you have or not have in the business currently is a real measure for the runway that you will have over the next uncertain time. And by this, it means the cash that you have and that the cash that you are going to spend. So we've seen many politicians and many business leaders say they will be taking salary cuts. I think it's incumbent on all business leaders really to really consider that, because we are in a temporary period, and it will encourage us. If you're anything like us, pressure brings just amazing innovation in the Thinkroom team. And so however you plan to hold on to the cash that you have or that you don't have, you've got to drastically reduce expenses as much as possible. And the reality is, and we said this on another clip earlier this week, that there are many expenses that you now won't have, right? So if you won't have travel expenses, as an example, if you're in complete lockdown and if you're not part of essential services, and you could be negotiating with your landlords about rentals, etc., etc. The reality is that all landlords are negotiating on rentals right now, and because they understand this just too well because of the impact. The next one is the customers, and we're going to be talking about that for the remaining time on this call anyway, about the sales. But if ever there was a time to be close to your customers, it is right now. Why? They are just as unsure as we are about what's going to be happening in business. And if you haven't done this yet, one of the most important pieces of advice I can give you, we've actually just finished this with our round of clients 2 weeks ago, is to have a discussion with every single one of your clients, if it's B2B and it's possible in some form or fashion. If it's B2C, of course you can't, but then have communication in a different way, because you can't have communication with all of them. But make sure that you speak to customers and clients about what it is, being honest, being open, being transparent, being vulnerable, being authentic. Now more than ever, it's important that you just have those discussions. And the discussions need to include this. customer A or client B, we have this in the pipeline. If it's B2B, I'm going to speak B2B first. We have this in the pipeline. This was the work that we were going to do with you. This was the confirmed order. Is this still the case? And ask for transparency, and you will be surprised to see how many of your clients from a B2B perspective will open up, because they are exactly where we are. Remember, we're all in the same boat. From the other point of view, it's about from a B2C point of view, you have to just get some feedback loops in place. So how did you usually speak to your customers from a B2C, and now where do you find them, and what is the best way to find them, and make sure that you do that. So speaking to customers and clients more important than ever, and getting feedback so that you can understand what your next move would be. Credit I've spoken about. Go and we're saying get the lines of credit. Even if you don't use them, for those who don't qualify for lines of credit, try and get into whatever government incentives there are. We know some countries are so much slower than others to try and get the money to be paid out. But I think the reality is that if you're not able to get your hand on credit extensions, or you don't get your hands on credit, the credit's going to come from ourselves. This is going to be a time where we will go back into bonds if we have bonds. We will go back into literally going into savings if we have savings. Or the other way is going to be cutting costs. That's a way of credit. And unfortunately, it's going to be drastic cuts. But we've also found that when you speak to your teams, and where there aren't incentives in place from governments with team salaries, where you speak to teams, they understand the boat. Remember, we're all in the same boat. So they understand this whole credit scenario, and they understand. So have those authentic conversations. Communication, you can't communicate enough, and I've said that before. And then as working with teams and working with partners, more than ever, it's going to be so important to take leadership. And by this, I don't mean business owners only. I'm talking every single team member in whatever team is going to be responsible and accountable to take leadership. There's just no way around it. We're going to have to support each other through this. Okay, so that's given you really a lot of information. So now what? Okay, what now with all this in mind? What does that mean for sales? And that's why you're on this call, because you will be interested in increasing your sales, either that or trying to protect. So I want to very briefly share the typical process of when you're selling. So literally once a year, we do that industry analysis. We understand what's happening in our industry. We do a SWOT, and we understand what are we really strong at, where are the opportunities. We plan that typically in a fiscal year, or over a 3-year period, depending on the business that we're in. We understand really well what happens with the competitors, and then we go into the typical thing. Okay, so what is my why? Value proposition. We were on a call yesterday, and I'll use that in an example later on, but we were talking about value proposition, and this particular organization I have, in fact, Willow said she's more than happy for us to talk about this. So Willow has done really good work in the traditional sense of value proposition and what the value proposition looks like, and the why, and why customers buy from them in the way that they do. The reality is that we don't have that normal as we knew it anymore. And value proposition, hear me out, value proposition right now is more important than ever, because the why that they're buying is so much more basic. It's and Willow yesterday, one of the key points in Willow's business is about trust, client trust, and how do they ensure that, because the why they use the product and the software as a service is because they need to be able to depend on efficiencies and of course corporates all over the world right now want efficiencies. So value proposition is going to be more important than ever, right? So, and we will have a slide about that shortly. Target market, in the traditional sense, we now, after we understand our why, we go and determine a target market, who we're selling to, and then we pay a lot of money to get all the data of what the target market looks like, and then we develop personas, and we would, for a B2B, would say, as an example, we are selling to a typical 25 to 28-year-old, and they do this as hobbies, and they find their information from this source, etc., etc. The reality is, and I will show you a slide very shortly, is that personas for now are very fluid. Anybody on the on this call right now who can say that your life hasn't changed in any way, you haven't changed behavior in any way, that's just not so. So again, we're in the same boat. So your clients and your customers are also, their behaviors have changed, their personas have changed, and we cannot go and sell currently on a persona we developed when it was just a normal, typical process. So we're going to be talking about that. And then the customer journeys, of course, customer journeys, you know, they first go and see what they can buy and where, and they go find how you need to be showing up because they need to find you, and then they come and buy. The reality is that customer journeys are also now changing, and I'll give you some examples of that later on. So customer personas and their journeys have dramatically changed. And if you're going to try and sell in the same old way as you have before, BC, before COVID, and after COVID, it's just, and now whilst we're in COVID and after COVID, it's just not, the same formula is not going to work. So, and then we typically go into our sales and marketing and PR, budgeting and planning, and then we go and get the stuff done and get into execution and measure thereafter. The reality is that things are no longer typical, and the sequencing could be all over the place depending on who you ask, at what time of the day, in which country, wherever we are at. So the reality here is that if you can accept that things are no longer typical and we can't hang on to existing collateral, and I'm now talking at the tactical level, that is typically a stage 4, but we can't stick around and accept that we're going to use existing collateral in an existing channel in a normal way, because the reality is you are just not going to keep and get new customers or clients this way. So how do you sell more? And this is an age-old question about really how do you get more sales into the business? And the age-old answer, which is still very relevant, however, we're going to have a spin on this now with operating in this uncertainty. You sell more in 2 ways. You get new customers, or you sell more to your existing customers. In the current scenario, and we're going to be talking about that next, but in the current scenario, getting new customers means that you really have to come with a value proposition. So a why. So why would they buy from you? They would buy from you if you are satisfying the very basic needs. And when I show you the Bain Consulting Group, value pyramid just now, I'm going to explain that more. But if you are going for new customers, understand that you will have to go to them in a way that will make them feel safe, in a way that will make them feel comfortable with what you're going to be providing them, and in a way that they're going to feel that they can trust you with this uncertainty, as uncertain as they are. That's the one part of it, getting new customers, so acquisition of customers. The other part of it is selling more to your existing. So hear me out. Currently, selling more to your existing customers in industries that are not dramatically impacted, like travel, 90% issues, like hospitality, 88% issues. If you're not impacted directly like that, and you are seeing in your industry losses of 30 to 35%, which is absolutely now normal, try and sell more to existing customers I completely understand that we need to continuously acquire. And depending on your business model, of course, if you have a subscription business model and you are selling, you're just selling subscriptions online, getting new customers will obviously be critical to your revenue. But also in that same example, see how you can just hang on to existing subscriptions as much as possible. Because where will people cut expenses to just get through this from both a personal and a business point of view would be some of those subscription models. The point with this example is only to say we have to try and sell more to existing customers. It will just be an easier way to get there than acquiring new from scratch. But these have to run simultaneously. If we can just manage our expectations that getting new customers will lag a little bit behind bringing revenue into the business than selling more to existing customers, we will already be able to manage our teams and our mindsets in that way. So now more than ever is so important to look after your existing customers and clients, have touch points with them. I don't know if any of you subscribe to some of the major hotel groups, but for us who travel a lot, of course we get our newsletters from Radisson, from Marriott, from the Airways. And for the first time in my life, the other day, I got a newsletter that had me in tears, and it was a newsletter from British Airways talking about not being able to fly right now and talking about how they understand what that means for travelers who can't fly. But for now, they understand the planes are on the ground. But for now, they just want to make sure that customers are safe and customers' basic needs are addressed, and then they go into an executional, tactical way of saying, use your frequent travel miles if you want to just use that to buy things, essential things, etc., etc. The reality is you have to find your voice and your way to talk to your existing customers whilst you have the secondary line of going to acquire new customers. I'm going to very briefly now touch on the 5 points because we've got 5 minutes left before we go over to questions. So what do we do in normal as we know it now? For industry analysis, for your SWOT and your competitive analysis, stay on top of information. I read an alarming statistic last week or the week before that 30% of what we know, just as in before COVID, 30% of what we know in our lifetime expires every year. In other words, we've got literally 3 years, a 3-year cycle where we could end up knowing nothing. So it's now more important than ever that you stay on top of information. Is there somebody in your business, as an example, who is continuously scanning your customer segments or your client segments? Are they understanding what those personas are doing, how they've changed? Things are changing by the day, and only those companies that are staying and going to stay on top of information and understanding how they're changing and adapting accordingly, only those truly would be able to make this through. Stay on top of your competitor activities. Now more than ever, we've seen some countries, of course, how else, especially in essential services, drop competitive laws for a while just for competitors to be able to work together to address this pandemic. We have an example of this as an example in the UK. We know where airlines are working together just to get residents back. We have a similar example in South Africa as an example where retailers are working together literally just to get food to communities. You have to stay on top of this and actually consider where you can work with competitors to actually get a better voice out there to service a particular need. Our advice truly is, it's now continuous reviewing of your business model. No, by no means am I saying that you have to pivot continuously, but you have to understand, I had to understand for my business that if I wanted to sell the same as what I do to the same customer target persona of what I used to in the same way, I literally just won't make it. So we had to pivot in different ways. Doing this as an example today of giving back into the industry, there is no ways that we cannot help in the world that we live in, entrepreneurs just to stay on top of what they are. So you have to continuously pivot. Let me give you an example. There's an online events company, Quicket. Find them on at Quicket, Quicket. If somebody can just pop it in the chat group. But Quicket, as an example, when COVID hit and we had this issue of lockdown and no events being able to happen, what they lost 95, I think that's what the owner James Tagg said, 95% of their revenue overnight, right? So what Quicket had to do, and today you've as an example, you've confirmed your attendance here through the Quicket, they had to pivot and they had to understand that online events, webinars, seminars will now have to be the normal that they go into, and they did that quickly. But there isn't time to go through committees. There isn't time to get to get approval on approval on approval. It's responsiveness at the next level, and that's how we are going to get through this. So stay on top of your information, stay on top of your competitors, see how you can collaborate if you have to, and continuously review. Value proposition, and I want to spend time on the next slide because we're out of time. But value proposition, your why, as I said, is now more important than ever. Your target market is fluid, as we said in the personas are fluid, and the journey is more non-linear than ever. When you get the deck, please go and look at the Bain Consulting Group Value Pyramid. And in fact, we will send you the link as well because it's a very nice interactive pyramid. But the reality is, your why that you typically sell, we often advise clients, entrepreneurs, whoever we work with when we tell them how to sell, we often advise them, make sure that you sell at a level where it is social impact. Self-transcendence literally means, how do I get to a next level of being safe, being secure, being happy with life, and life-changing. If there's ever a time where our why needs to be addressing the top two, because so many of us stay here in the functional bits of, oh, it'll save you time, it'll make you more effective, it will simplify your life. The reality is, although our needs are at the most basic level, we are buying at this level of making us feel that it will change our life. There is hope. There will be social impact. As an example, there's an American shoe store who, for every pair of shoes that they sell, they now donate to a charity to make sure that money goes in for COVID. What is it, your why, whilst you are ticking the functional and the emotional boxes, that you are being able to say to your customers and your clients, we are in here with you, same boat, and we are going to try and do life-changing and social impact things for you in a way that you've never known before. Please go and engage with the link that we will send through. The customer, I'm not going to speak about this, but I've included it in the deck because this is so important as we speak about customer journey. Now it's non-linear than ever. So where they used to explore alternatives, evaluate and buy, and then the next part of it where they now are a client and you want to retain them, expand, renew and renew. The reality is this is so fluid now. So what you will see, and this is just one example of 4,000 different customer personas, 4,000 in the sample of saying 4,000, and this study was done, if I remember correctly, in the US and the UK by Visual Capitalists. If there's one website that you have to follow, I literally do a check on them every day. They're doing amazing work in making us understand COVID better and how it is impacting business and life. But they, as an example, have looked at the 4,000 sample and how Gen Z versus millennials versus X versus the boomers are consuming media. Why is this as important? So I'm using one example of a tactic that you have. So if media is one of the channels that you sell through, how and you understand the sort of target market in terms of age demographic, who you're selling to, know that the guys are consuming media so differently. The Gen Zs, as an example, no surprise, but the Gen Zs were the only group in this example where news consumption was not the most highest on the priority in terms of consuming online, but music was. How interesting is that? So so that is just an example. So if there is so Iona FM, one of the entrepreneurs that we work with in one of the geographies, radio. So that has dramatically, because they had to go look at how people consume radio information differently now, that has dramatically changed how they're speaking through the various channels to their various target markets. So I hope this example of personas, you've got to go find your own, work in your own way, but I hope that that will help. Very briefly now on the sales and the PR and the marketing plan. Getting back to basics are more important than ever. You are going to have to get your objectives much more short-term, and you're going to have to break them down for your team in a much more smaller way, and driving shorter objectives, and make sure that as a team you understand that the small parts make the whole. The only way we're going to mentally survive the next 12 to 18 months also is by absolutely celebrating the small wins and absolutely making those small jumps. So in terms of sales, making sure that you go back to the basics of understanding who you're going to sell, prepare before the time if you are going to sell, and I'm almost going into the next slide with tactics, prepare properly for it, and then understand, get to know the knows and the unknows very quickly. What am I meaning by that? Be comfortable that you will only know 40%. Be comfortable that you will only understand 40% of what your target market now is thinking or doing. But if you're transparent, open, ask for feedback, you will get to learn with them more and more, almost as we are now starting to learn with the COVID pandemic. As the numbers come, the modeling is changing. The only way that you are going to be able to make sure that your plan works is to be much more regular in updating it and being much more fluid with budgets. And by that, I don't mean spending, I mean spending for the right things and cutting for the right things. So in terms of tactics, I think the one message I want to leave you with, please, 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 you have to adapt to survive. And it is only going to be those, as I suppose is an age millennial old piece of knowledge, but those who will adapt will survive through this, and we can. So making sure that you understand how you can pivot, small pivots where you have to. Another quick example I want to use in closing is, we have another company who's been literally been doing AI for manufacturing. Big crisis, as we explained earlier on in this webinar, that manufacturing is absolutely non-existent right now. And what was interesting is they pivoted. So they had the tools and the mechanisms through AI, through their modeling, through their product, to be able to truly use it to determine anything really. And they've climbed on and looking at now at the COVID data and looking at health data, because that's going to be an industry that's going to be absolutely critical for the future. The reality is many of us won't engage, even after isolation breaks, even after lockdowns break, because there will be a fear factor, as was with the Spanish flu. How is your business prepared to sell in that time, even after lockdown? And that's what you have to consider. And remember, there will be that question in closing: where were you when? Where were you when COVID happened? And by engaging openly with your customers, by being authentic about your sales targets and not reaching them, by asking them to authentically tell you and honestly tell you, if they can, they will know 40% only also, what it is they can spend or not, you'll be able to get there. And then measurement. For now, it's not about making profit. It's not even about making a little bit of money. It's about survival. And it's about, if you can get your current clients and customers retained and acquire new through the channels in a way that you start to understand them, you will absolutely get through this. And then going online, you'll just see in the deck, this is just we are all now having to sell online. There is no possibility in those countries where we lock down, and those who are not, the lockdown will definitely come. But as we go out of lockdown, again, movement will still be different and changed. Make sure that you understand how to go online. I know that we have Zwana runs a how to on going online and making sure that when you pitch that you're professional and that your content is prepared. So that is really, in terms of sales. In wrapping up, it is now normal to not be sure of how to sell. It's critical that you look at your business model and you pivot in small pivots to where you can. It's critical to have a very open and honest conversation with your clients, making sure that so that you can understand what happens there. And truly, it's just about keeping on. So over to the team. I don't know. Thank you for sharing, those who've shared handles with us. If there are no other questions, I'm scanning very quickly. No other questions on sales, then we can definitely conclude. If the team can just give me a thumbs up if there are no other questions on the chat. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Be good. Make sure to catch our other sessions. We've got a session on PR, people coming up, a session on finance coming up. There's already a session on strategy that we've uploaded on our YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out. Thank you very much.